I'm Elizabeth at Literary Princess. If you are new here, welcome. I am a 6-year PhD candidate in English literature with a focus on Victorian women novelists, and as you might expect, I love to read. Today I have my Victober Wrap Up for you, which means it is the last video of Victober 2024. And that's sad to me. I love Victober so much. It is an event hosted by Katie from Books and Things, Kate Howe, Marissa from Blatantly Bookish, and Roz from Scally Dandling About the Books, and it is all about reading Victorian literature in the month of October. Obviously perfect for me as a Victorianist. So I read a total of 6 books. 5 of them were books written in the Victorian period, and 1 was a book about the Victorian period, so I consider that counting. I completed all 5 challenges, which we will talk about as we get to them. I did not participate in the group read, however, I have read the group read, which was The Doctor's Wife by Mary Elizabeth Braddon, and I posted a video on it because I am writing a dissertation chapter on it. So you can check that out if you want any of my thoughts on The Doctor's Wife. So let's jump in. First up is a book that knocked off 3 of the challenges. The first is Katie's challenge, which was to read a work that plays with form in some way. The second was Marissa's challenge, which was to read a book that was serialized. And the third was the group challenge to read a work by either Wilkie Collins or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Challenge was to honor Jennifer Brooks and Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, who sadly passed away this year. So this wonderful 3-prompt hitting novel was No Name by Wilkie Collins. And I loved this so much. Oh my goodness. This is the story of 2 sisters, Nora and Magdalene Vanstone, who, when their parents die, find out that their parents were not married when they had their daughters, which leaves them disinherited because they are illegitimate. And Magdalene will not stand for that. And she is going to try her hardest to get their fortune back. This was wonderful. This is my 3rd Wilkie Collins book. I have loved everything I read by him. This was no different. So this plays with form quite a lot. There are, I forget how many, but there are different scenes, and they are in the 3rd person. But then in between each scene are things like progress of the story through the post. And then at one point we get an excerpt from somebody's, like, I'm trying to, here we go. Captain Rag's dispatch box. So it's like all these different letters and entries and whatnot, in addition to the regular 3rd-person narration. I thought that was great. Wilkie Collins does stuff like this a lot, and he always does a great job with it. I thought this might end up being my new favorite Wilkie Collins book, but The Woman in White still wins out. I thought that this kind of suffered actually a bit from being a serialized 3-volume novel. I feel like the end kind of dragged out a little bit. However, I loved it so much that I didn't really care. Magdalene is one of my new favorite Victorian characters, and it was just so, so good. 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. Next up, counted for Roz's challenge, which was to read a work of Victorian drama. And for this, I read A Woman of No Importance by Oscar Wilde, which I have in this bind-up of The Importance of Being Earnest and other plays. A Woman of No Importance reminded me a lot of Lady Windermere's Fan. I didn't like it quite as much as Lady Windermere's Fan. I would say that so far of the 3 plays I've read by Oscar Wilde, A Woman of No Importance is my least favorite, but I still really liked it. It takes place during a country house party. It is a social satire with also some melodrama in it. Largely looking at the kind of double standard, I guess, of women and men having relations outside of marriage. I thought that like the first two acts were super funny because that was really focused on the house party and like all the more minor characters being straight up ridiculous, which was great. As we moved into the main plot, I was kind of like, eh. But it was still really fun and I gave it 4 stars. I think next year I'll probably be reading An Ideal Husband and then maybe Salome the next year, and then I'll have read all of these. But yeah, I do like Oscar Wilde. But again, as I had with The Importance of Being Earnest and Lady Windermere's Fan, what I really want is to see these performed. Because obviously that's how they're meant to be experienced. And I also just really want to go to the theater. I haven't been to the theater in a really long time. And it would be so fun, but alas, I know of no theaters putting on any Oscar Wilde plays near me. So, but I did have a really good time with this. Next up was the only dud of the month, and it was for my dissertation. This is Ariadne, The Story of a Dream by Ouida. This takes place in 19th century Italy and is following a group of Italians. The shoemaker, Crispino. I'm also honestly not sure if it's Crispin or Crispino because he was referred to as both throughout the book, so I have no idea. The sculptor, Marix, and the jerk, the jerk poet, Hilarion. When Crispin, or Crispino, whatever you want to call him, meets this young woman named Gioia, I don't know, him and Marix become like really invested in her. She becomes an apprentice to Marix and is learning sculpting. But then Hilarion comes in and she starts falling in love with him, but he's a womanizing dick. So, yeah. Look, I usually really like Ouida. Like, I feel like I am Ouida's champion. I'm always like, everyone should read Ouida. Moths is so good. Under Two Flags is a really good time. This was a rough go. This was a really rough go. So what I was going to be talking about in my dissertation was kind of how this and her other Italian novels are kind of an attempt to be more high culture instead of like the kind of popular sensation, adventure melodramas that she was originally known for. And in doing so, she's doing a lot of references to classical mythology and art and whatnot, and it really got tedious. It got really, really tedious. I also had no footnotes because this was not like a Penguin edition or anything. Like, this book isn't really in print. It was an Delphi collected works of Ouida. So there's no footnotes or anything. So I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about half the time. But also, the character of Gioia made me so mad. She's like obsessed with Hilarion. Like, for no good reason. Like, apparently he's attractive. Okay, girl. Look at your life. Look at your choices. He treats her like crap, and she's all in love with him. And, like, basically won't love anyone else. Like, not even in a friendship kind of a way. Like, all these people are doing so much for her. Crispino literally gives up the room that he rents for her. He keeps paying the rent and letting her live there. Meanwhile, he's like sleeping outside. And she's always being like, oh, I'm so ungrateful because I don't love any of you. And they're all like, it's okay, Julia, it's okay. I'm like, no, actually, it's not. She's ungrateful and awful and doesn't care about anybody except what she wants. She was terrible. And she was such a martyr about it, and she just made me so mad. She made bad choices, she was dumb, and she was ungrateful, and it made me angry. The only character that I really cared about was Crispino's dog, who was a great character. I loved the dog. But yeah, no, I just couldn't get on board with Joya being this wonderful character, because it really seems like we're not supposed to hate her the way that I did. Like, we're supposed to think of her as this great noble character. I'm like, no, she's horrible. I hate her so much. I don't really like any of the men either. Like, yeah, Hilarion, he sucks. He's a dick. But like, I don't know. Just, I have an easier time forgiving a character that is just like a dick and like a womanizing jerk. And like, that's what he's supposed to be. And like, okay, yes, that is him. I'm like, that's fine. But when there's a character that's always like mooning over that dickish character and like does not seem to learn that he's just a jerk, I can't stand that. I cannot stand it. So this was 2 stars, and I'm actually rethinking whether I want to write this chapter and if I should find a new 4th chapter, because I don't think I can write about this without making my life utterly miserable. So yeah, that's Ariadne. 0 out of 10, would not recommend. It's 2 stars for the dog. It's 2 stars because I can recognize, like, there were aspects that I was enjoying, like, sometimes, not very often, but the stuff about her becoming a sculptor I really liked. And there were some things that if it just had been different, it would have been good. So I gave it 2 stars. Would not recommend at all. Moths, Under 2 Flags, recommend, yes. Ariadne, no. Mm-mm. Next up was another book for the group read, and this is The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So this is the first short story collection of Sherlock Holmes stories. I was originally actually going to read the final novel, The Valley of Fear, which was not actually written in the Victorian period. I think it came out in 1915. But that's one of the novels that the only novel that I haven't read. However, as I was going through the table of contents on my complete Sherlock Holmes on my Kindle, I realized I've only read half of the stories from The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which is kind of the problem, like when you just get an anthology of random stories, is you get a few from the adventures, you get a few from the memoirs, a few from the case book. And I was like, oh, you know what? I should just read. I should read the rest of these and also reread all the other ones, because some of my absolute favorite Sherlock Holmes stories are in this collection. So there are a total of 12 stories. I had read 8 of them before, so literally half. And I had such a good time revisiting some of my favorites, particularly The Adventure of the Speckled Band and The Adventure of the Copper Beeches. I love those 2. They are so good. They are so good, but also found a new favorite one, The Adventure of the Beryl Coronet. And like some really weird ones that I'd never ever encountered. The Adventure of the Engineer's Thumb was crazy. It's like, what? If you don't know, Sherlock Holmes is a detective and he is assisted by his flatmate, Dr. Watson. So I guess in like the publication order, these stories come after the first two novels, which are A Study in Scarlet and The Sign of Four. But the stories kind of go back and forth, like they're not in a chronological order. Some of them take place before The Sign of Four, and some of them take place after, because in The Sign of Four, John Watson gets married and obviously moves out of Baker Street, but is still like a frequent visitor after. And I feel like, I think her name is Mary, his wife, must be like the most understanding, wonderful woman in the world, because there is literally a time when some woman in distress shows up at their house in the middle of the night. Watson's just always, going off wherever with Sherlock, and she's the most understanding woman ever. I loved this. It was such a delight. The Sherlock Holmes stories are always such a delight for me, so this was a 5 stars. And the next book was for Kate's Challenge. It was not originally what I was going to read for Kate's Challenge. Originally, I was going to read The Daisy Chain. So Kate's Challenge is to read a work that has a religious component. The Daisy Chain by Charlotte Mary Young has a very strong religious component. I'm actually reading it right now. I started it, just didn't finish it in October. However, I do think that this one counts as well. This is Deerbrook by Harriet Martineau. This is a work of early Victorian fiction following two sisters whose names are on the back, I hope. Margaret and Hester, or Hester and Margaret. Hester is the older one. Ibbotson, who come to the town of Deerbrook to stay with some relatives and everything that goes on from there. This is a story largely concerned with gossip and what happens in a small town when gossip gets a little bit out of control, and the different factions that form and people who get caught in the crossfire and the problems that it causes. But there is a religious component. It's not as strong in something like The Daisy Chain, but there is a good amount of talk about faith and whatnot. And they are actually dissenters, which does not play a huge role in the book, but they are dissenters. I'm pretty sure Martineau was a dissenter as well, and probably that's why they are also dissenters. But there were a lot of lovely passages about faith in here, and I think that counts for the challenge. I loved this. This was a 5-star read from me, and I'm now making my mother read it because I know she's going to love it. It was just delightful. It was utterly delightful. I have a new most hated character from this book. Oh my god, she's awful. What is her name? I can't even remember. I can't remember names. I think any of you who have been around for a while know that I can't remember names. This is Roland. Worst person ever. But it was very fun to hate her. I highly recommend it if you're a fan of Jane Austen or of Elizabeth Gaskell, or if you liked Katie Lumsden's book, The Trouble with Mrs. Montgomery Hearst, which also deals with the effects of gossip. I feel like in that way, these two books were very similar. But yeah, it was just great. I was blown away. And yeah, I highly recommend this one. And the final book was one that is not from the Victorian period, but it is about the Victorian period. And this is Sensational Victorian, The Life and Fiction of Mary Elizabeth Braddon by Robert Lee Wolfe. This is obviously a biography of the writer Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Since I'm writing a dissertation chapter on her, I need to know about her. This was really good. It quotes very liberally from her letters, which Wolfe owned this whole collection of her letters. They are now at the Harry Ransom Center at University of Texas in Austin, and they're all digitalized, so that's always fun. But yeah, so there was a lot of really helpful stuff for me, and he also talks about each of her books, or not each of them, she wrote a lot of books, but a lot of her significant ones. I did not always agree with his opinions on the books. Like, he thinks The Lady's Mile is one of her best, and I do not. It's not bad, but best, no. No. So we didn't always agree, but I did really enjoy this, and I thought it was a great book to pick up if you want to learn more about Braddon. And that is my Victober wrap up. So another Victober gone, which I obviously I read Victorian literature year round because it's my job, but I don't know, there's just something so special about the community surrounding Victober, and I really enjoy sharing it with everybody. And I had a good time making my videos for this year, which you can find on my playlist, and I loved watching everyone else's videos. I don't know, I just love Victober. It's amazing and great, and I cannot wait for Victober 2025. Many thanks to our wonderful hosts. Let me know down in the comments below, what did you read in October? Were you participating in Victober? Did you finish the challenges? What did you read for them? If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more of my bookish content. It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.